Um, what if the reason your knees ache when you wake up has absolutely nothing to do with your bones wearing down? Like, what if instead your joints are literally just dying of thirst?
I mean, it sounds wild when you first hear it, but it's totally grounded in how our biology actually works.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are looking at an incredibly pervasive issue, the loss of mobility as we age.
Yeah, something almost everyone deals with eventually.
Exactly. And we're pulling from this fascinating piece of source material titled Biodynamics, Restoring the Fluidity of Natural Movement. Our mission for this deep dive is to look at the actual mechanics of why stiffness happens, uncover the hidden physical and emotional tolls it takes on you, and examine how modern joint research is shifting away from just masking pain.
Which is huge, because society has largely conditioned us to view joint pain and stiffness as this unavoidable tax we pay for simply existing past the age of 40.
Yeah, the classic wear and tear excuse.
Exactly. We categorize it under this catch-all phrase of wear and tear, which implies, a mechanical degradation that simply cannot be reversed. But the research highlighted in our source material today tells a very different story.
Right.
It forces us to look at the microenvironment inside the joint capsule itself.
So let's start right there with that physical environment, because the first major paradigm shift in this text is completely dismantling that wear and tear assumption.
Mm-hmm.
The text points out that chronologically aging doesn't automatically equal pain. The real culprit is frequently a gradual loss of joint lubrication. We're talking about hydration, but on a cellular level.
Yeah, to really understand this, you have to look at the anatomy. A healthy joint is not just two bones rubbing together.
Thank goodness.
Right. They are encased in a synovial capsule, which is essentially this sealed environment filled with a highly viscous, slippery substance called synovial fluid. And its primary function is to reduce friction between the cartilage covering the ends of your bones. When you're younger, your body produces an abundance of these specific molecules that make this fluid thick and plump.
Because they bind to water, right?
Exactly. They bind to water. This creates a really robust, fluid-filled cushion. But over time, the production of those water-binding molecules slows down.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, and the volume of the fluid decreases, its consistency becomes thinner, the joint environment literally just dries out.
The source material uses words that I think will resonate with anyone listening who has felt this before. Words like dry, rusty, stuck, grinding, heavy.
Oh yeah, people use those exact words all the time.
Right, and they use the analogy of a door hinge to explain this, which I loved. Like if you have a brand new, well-lubricated hinge, the door swings silently. It's totally effortless.
Mm-hmm.
But if the oil dries up, that same hinge resists you. It groans, it catches. You have to use actual physical force to shove the door open.
And the physics of a dry hinge apply directly to human biomechanics.
Wow, really?
Yeah. With the dry hinge, the metal itself hasn't necessarily deformed, right? The door isn't fundamentally broken. The friction is occurring because the medium that facilitates smooth movement is just gone.
Okay, I see.
Your joints are subjected to those exact identical forces of friction when that synovial fluid is depleted.
Wait, hold on. I want to push back on this a little because this sounds almost too simple.
Sure.
If someone goes to their doctor and gets an x-ray, and the doctor says, look, you have bone-on-bone contact, your cartilage is totally shot, how can hydration possibly fix that? Aren't we talking about permanent structural damage at that point?
Well, you're bringing up end-stage joint disease, which is a harsh structural reality for some people.
Right.
But the source material is addressing the vast majority of adults experiencing daily stiffness, resistance, and aching who are not actually at that end stage.
Oh, okay.
The critical insight here is that the wear and tear you see on an X-ray is often the late-stage result of living with a dehydrated joint for decades. It's not the initial cause of the pain.
Oh, wow. So the friction comes first and the damage comes later.
Precisely. If we reframe the initial problem from my knee is fundamentally broken to my knee is currently under-lubricated, well, we change the treatment protocol entirely. We move from waiting around for a joint replacement to actively intervening to restore that fluid barrier.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You're trying to put the oil back in the hinge before the metal actually grinds itself to dust.
Exactly.
And when you're walking around with these dry hinges, it triggers this cascade of hidden consequences.
Yeah.
The text dives into something I found deeply compelling, which is the energy drain.
Yes, this is a huge point.
Right. Because when your joints lack lubrication, your body has to spend a massive amount of excess energy just to perform basic tasks.
What's fascinating here is the sheer metabolic cost of friction. When a joint is restricted, the primary muscles responsible for moving that joint, say your quadriceps, when you're straightening your knee, they have to work significantly harder. But it goes even deeper than that. Your antagonist muscles, the ones that are supposed to relax to let the movement happen, they end up firing too.
Wait, why would they do that?
Because they're trying to stabilize this compromised, dry joint. Your central nervous system is essentially fighting itself just to force movement through a restricted pathway.
I was trying to visualize this while reading, and the best way I can describe it is uh, driving a car on the highway with the emergency brake slightly pulled up.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. Like the car is still moving forward. You're still getting to your destination. But the engine is working twice as hard just to maintain 60 miles an hour.
Exactly.
You're burning through gas, the transmission is straining, and the whole ride just feels incredibly sluggish. That has to be what our muscular system is doing when it's forced to compensate for dry joints.
That analogy holds up perfectly on a physiological level. I mean, the caloric output required to just stand in line at the grocery store, or to balance while carrying a box, or climb a flight of stairs, it spikes dramatically when joint friction is high. And because this dehydration happens incrementally over years, the person rarely connects the exhaustion directly to their joints.
So they just feel tired all the time.
Right. They hit the couch at 6 p.m. feeling this profound systemic fatigue. And as the text notes, they usually blame their cardiovascular fitness.
Oh, yeah. Like, I'm just out of shape.
Exactly. They think, I'm just losing my stamina, or this is just what getting old feels like. They mask a localized mechanical problem as a systemic failure of aging.
Which brings a massive emotional toll with it. You know, the mental bandwidth it takes to constantly calculate the physical cost of your environment.
It's exhausting.
It is. You pull into a parking lot and you find yourself scanning for a spot, not based on convenience, but based on whether you have the physical reserves to walk across the asphalt.
Yeah.
The text specifically highlights playing with grandchildren or carrying groceries. These are supposed to be mundane or even joyful parts of life. But when your internal emergency brake is engaged, they become logistical nightmares.
The neurological term for what you're describing is predictive coding. Your brain is essentially a prediction machine.
Okay.
When every movement for the past 6 months has required excess energy and resulted in a friction-based pain signal, the brain begins to anticipate the pain before you even move.
Oh, that sounds awful.
Yeah.
So you're dreading it before it even happens.
Exactly. It creates a state of chronic hypervigilance. The mental exhaustion of dreading the stairs compounds the actual physical exhaustion of climbing them. It is an incredibly heavy tax on a person's baseline well-being.
And when you're bleeding energy like that, and your brain is constantly predicting pain, of course your behavior is going to change.
It has to.
And the source text outlines how this physical energy drain leads directly to a vicious cycle of avoidance. You start turning down invitations, you stop taking the evening walk you used to enjoy, you basically just make your world smaller.
The source material is very careful to clarify the psychology here, actually. When people begin opting out of physical activity, society often labels them as lazy or lacking motivation.
Yeah, the guilt trip.
Right. But biologically, they are exhibiting a highly rational response.
Yeah.
Their nervous system is screaming at them that movement is too energetically costly and physically damaging. Avoidance is literally a protective mechanism.
I really want to pause on that for you listening right now. If you have been beating yourself up for losing your motivation to exercise, or, if you're watching a parent decline social outings and you're getting frustrated with them, it is not a character flaw.
Not at all.
It is a biological calculation. But while it's a rational response, the research shows it's also the most dangerous thing you can do, because avoiding movement triggers a devastating feedback loop.
The formula detailed in the text is pretty unforgiving. Reduced movement accelerates the loss of joint lubrication,
Right.
which increases the stiffness, which in turn leads to even less movement. Mobility really is the foundation of independence.
It really is.
The ability to walk without friction dictates your ability to travel, to navigate your community, and to maintain autonomy over your daily routine. When you lose confidence in your physical foundation, your entire psychological world contracts.
So we have this massive downward spiral caused by a lack of internal hydration, which means the traditional approach, taking an over-the-counter painkiller to numb the ache, doesn't actually solve the problem.
No, it doesn't.
It's just putting in earplugs so you don't hear the door hinge groaning. The friction is still happening. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the source material introduces a specific philosophy of intervention that abandons the painkiller approach entirely.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the frontier of joint research is entirely focused on disease modification rather than just symptom masking.
Okay.
The goal is to restore the biological environment of the joint capsule itself. The text we're analyzing points to a specific compound formulation called Biodynamix joint genesis.
Right, which is formulated by a doctor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, doctor-formulated and inspired by research out of Ivy League institutions. The focus of this specific formulation is to provide the body with the precursors it needs to synthesize and retain synovial fluid.
Okay, wait. I have to stop you there and play the skeptic for a second.
Fair enough.
We are talking about delivering hydration into a sealed joint capsule. Cartilage doesn't even have a blood supply. So how on earth does swallowing a supplement actually get lubrication into my knee? Wouldn't the compounds just be broken down by my liver and flushed out of my system before they ever reach a joint?
That is the exact biological hurdle that formulations in this space have to overcome. And you are correct that cartilage is avascular. It lacks direct blood flow.
Right.
However, the synovial membrane, the tissue that encapsulates the joint, is highly vascularized. It is absolutely full of blood vessels.
Oh, okay.
And this membrane acts as a biological filter. It pulls specific raw materials from your bloodstream and secretes them into the joint cavity as synovial fluid.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So the mechanism proposed by the Biodynamix formulation and similar research involves saturating the blood with specific, highly bioavailable molecules, often heavily modified forms of hyaluronan or specific antioxidants that can actually survive the digestive tract.
Okay, so they make it through the stomach.
Exactly. And once in the bloodstream, the synovial membrane extracts these molecules to thicken and rehydrate that fluid cushion.
Oh, wow. So you are essentially feeding the filter. You aren't sending water directly to the knee. You are sending the molecular sponges to the membrane, and the membrane uses them to trap water inside the joint.
Precisely the mechanism. The intention is to change the osmolarity or the water drawing power inside the joint space. The source text emphasizes that this is structural support.
Yeah.
You're aiming to restore the hydrostatic pressure that separates the bones, returning that smooth glide to the mechanism.
The text has this great, super pragmatic quote. The goal isn't to become 20 again. The goal is to feel capable again.
I love that quote.
It's so good because it acknowledges that people looking into these solutions aren't necessarily trying to join a CrossFit gym. They just want the mental freedom of knowing they can walk down a flight of stairs without wincing. They want to restore their capability by utilizing a lubricator rather than a numbing agent.
It centers on reclaiming the quality of life we discussed earlier. Addressing the physical friction at its source is really the only sustainable way to interrupt that predictive coding in the brain.
Right, getting the brain to stop anticipating pain.
Exactly. Because once the brain realizes that movement no longer carries a massive energetic penalty, the desire to be active naturally returns.
But, and the text is incredibly clear about this, you cannot just supplement your way out of this. You can't take Biodynamix, sit on the couch for a month, and expect a miracle.
No, definitely not.
The restored lubrication precursors have to be activated through physical action. And this brings us to what I call the movement paradox.
Yes, the movement paradox represents the most significant behavioral hurdle in joint recovery. The paradox is this. When a joint is inflamed and stiff, your biological instinct is to immobilize it.
Naturally.
Yet immobilization is the absolute worst thing you can do for a dehydrated joint.
Let me push on that, because it goes against literally every instinct we have. Like, if I twist my ankle, I use the Rice method. Rest, ice, compression, elevation. Rest is the first word.
Right.
If my knees are screaming after a walk, my body's warning system is flashing red telling me to stop. Are you saying that in the case of chronic stiffness, total rest is actively damaging the joint?
In the context of chronic age-related joint stiffness, yes. Total prolonged rest is detrimental.
Wow.
We have to go back to the anatomy you mentioned earlier.
That's right.
Because the cartilage itself lacks a blood supply, it relies entirely on mechanical force for its nutrition.
Okay, how does that work?
Think of your cartilage like a dense, wet sponge. When you take a step and put weight on your leg, you compress the cartilage, squeezing out the old, waste-filled fluid. Then, when you take the weight off, the cartilage expands, creating a vacuum that literally sucks in fresh, nutrient-rich synovial fluid from the surrounding capsule.
So walking is literally the pump that feeds the joint. Without the mechanical squish, The nutrients just sit in the capsule and never actually penetrate the cartilage.
That is the exact mechanism.
Hmm.
Without mechanical loading and unloading, the cartilage starves and becomes brittle regardless of how many supplements you take.
That's crazy.
Gentle, consistent movement acts as the hydraulic pump. The text emphasizes that walking is not merely a way to burn calories. It is a fundamental nutritional requirement for your skeletal system.
That completely reframes how I view taking a walk. It's not a chore to check off a list. It is literally feeding time for your joints.
Exact.
And to support this mechanical pump, the text outlines 5 holistic habits. These are things to pair with internal hydration strategies to really break the cycle of stiffness.
Yeah, and the 5 habits are really grounded in systemic biology. First up is staying hydrated.
Makes sense.
While we talked about the specific molecules in synovial fluid, the base of that fluid is still water. If you are systemically dehydrated, your body will triage water away from your joints to prioritize vital organs.
Oh, wow. It steals water from the joints.
Basically, yes.
Hmm.
Second is keeping moving. We just covered the sponge mechanism, but it's important to note the text suggests low-impact activities, like swimming, cycling, or daily walking. The goal is mechanical pumping, not high-impact stress.
Right. Consistency is the goal, not intensity.
Yeah.
What's the third habit?
Prioritizing sleep. And this isn't just about feeling rested.
Okay.
During deep, slow-wave sleep, your pituitary gland releases human growth hormone. This hormone directly stimulates the chondrocytes, which are the cells in your cartilage, to synthesize new tissue and repair the micro-damage from the day.
Wait, really?
Yeah, if you artificially truncate your sleep, you are cutting off the joint's primary repair window.
That is fascinating. We always think of sleep for muscle recovery, but it's structural joint recovery too. Habit number 4 is maintaining a healthy weight, which honestly just feels like simple physics.
It is physics. When you walk on level ground, the force placed on your knees is roughly 1.5 times your body weight.
Ouch.
Yeah, and when you go downstairs, it can be up to 3 or 4 times your body weight. Reducing your systemic weight exponentially reduces the mechanical shear force placed on that synovial cushion.
That makes total sense.
And the 5th habit is supporting joint nutrition, which circles back to providing the biological precursors we discussed with Biodynamix. Ensuring the synovial membrane has the raw materials it needs to filter into the capsule.
The overarching theme here is that small, consistent actions compound. You hydrate the joint internally, you take a gentle walk to pump that hydration into the cartilage, you sleep well to repair the tissue, and suddenly the friction decreases. When the friction decreases, the brain stops predicting pain. And when the brain stops predicting pain, your world opens back up.
It really does.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring this full circle for you listening. We started by looking at that dreaded morning stiffness, and we've learned that we don't have to just accept it as the irreversible wearing down of our bones.
No, you don't.
It is very often a localized mechanical issue, a lack of internal hydration causing friction, just like a dry door hinge. That friction creates a massive metabolic tax, it drains your energy, and it forces your nervous system into a state of avoidance that slowly shrinks your world.
Exactly.
But by shifting our focus to restoring the joint environment, utilizing modern nutritional strategies like Biodynamix to feed the synovial membrane, and pairing it with the mechanical pump of daily gentle movement, we can break that feedback loop. We can reclaim our physical autonomy. Because ultimately, the freedom to move without friction is the freedom to participate fully in your own life.
It really is the foundation of autonomy. And I want to leave you with the thought to mull over, building on the psychology we discussed today. We have established how deeply physical friction dictates your energy reserves, your willingness to socialize, and basically the geographic size of your daily world.
Right.
So consider this. How much of what you currently consider to be your aging personality, whether you think of yourself as a homebody or someone who prefers to observe rather than participate, or someone who is just naturally mellowed out, how much of that personality is actually just a direct reflection of dehydrated joints?
Oh, wow.
If you solve the mechanical friction, if you put the oil back in the hinge, do you actually unlock a more adventurous, outgoing version of yourself that was simply trapped behind a biological wall of resistance?
That is an incredible question to chew on. Is your personality changing, or do your joints just need a drink? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As always, keep questioning the things you assume are inevitable, keep exploring the mechanics of your own body, and above all, keep moving. We'll catch you on the next one.